Well, an investigation by DW has found that the German government has quietly cut funding for several human rights organizations that have often been critical of Israelis' actions in the war in Gaza. Since the Hamas terror attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, politicians in Germany have repeatedly emphasized that Israel's security is part of Germany's Staatsräson, or reason of state. DW's investigative team has more.
We are in the Israeli city of Beersheba, just 40 kilometers from Gaza. Sergei Sendler cannot fathom why German officials cut the funding of his NGO.
I don't know if it's been done so on purpose, but it's definitely been an intervention that was timed to deliver the most possible damage to our work.
Sendler works with the Israeli human rights organization New Profile. It supports conscientious objectives who risk imprisonment in Israel. Since Israel launched the war in Gaza, following Hamas terror attack in October 2023, New Profile has received ever more requests for support, Sendler says.
We're catering to a real need by many people, including many people who have served in the Israeli military and realized that they can't continue doing so, often for ethical reasons.
Since 2023, their work was funded by the German government through a partner NGO. After having been vetted by the Foreign Office, they had signed a 3-year contract, but shortly after they learned they had been defunded.
We are under enormous pressure all the time from the far right in Israel. But okay, what is the German government's business imposing the ideological demands of the Israeli government on Israeli citizens? What is the German government's business trying to silence dissent, not even inside its own country?
The decision was made by the German Foreign Office. Under Annalena Baerbock, it has repeatedly emphasized Germany's commitment to human rights. The ministry confirmed the defunding, but didn't provide DW or the NGOs with any official reason. Just
the Foreign Office examines all projects for which federal funds are used in accordance with legal requirements.
The defunding didn't just happen to New Profile. We know of at least one other Israeli human rights organization that had been supported by Germany for years, and several Palestinian ones that also lost their German funding recently. This comes at a time when in Israel the space for criticizing the government is shrinking, says lawyer Michael Swart. He has been advising Israeli and Palestinian human rights organizations for years.
We're in unprecedented, severe crackdown and targeting of Israeli human rights organizations and human rights activists. It's a trend that began a decade and a half ago, but came to its peak with the current government, and especially after October 7.
Rachel Betteri shares this experience. She's the director of Zochrot, the other Israeli organization whose funding was cut by the German government. Zochrot does awareness-raising activities like this tour in Israel. The group advocates for the recognition of the displacement and expulsion of Palestinians before and during the 1948 war and their right to return, which is a highly controversial topic in Israel. Betteri tells us that before their funding was rescinded, she met with German officials who, she says, made reference to the Holocaust to justify their position.
The German past, the Nazi regime was, brought up again and again in these conversations. It's important to Germany to support Israel because of the past. That was very explicitly said.
In a last-ditch effort, Zochrot even sent an official letter to the Foreign Office clarifying: the existence of the State of Israel is a fact, not a question, an opinion or moral judgment. We do not question any of this. But to no effect. They were defunded, no further reasons given. She thinks that Germany was under pressure from the Israeli right-wing government.
My great-grandparents all died in the Holocaust. I don't want this tragedy to be used to justify another tragedy and another mass killing. And I really find it quite offensive and dishonest, really.
Confronted with the allegations of Israeli influence, the German Foreign Office answered,
This insinuation is inaccurate. The German government continues to support numerous NGOs in Israel and in the Palestinian territories that are critical of Israel's occupation policy.
And joining me now here in the studio is DW investigative reporter Naomi Conrad, who participated in this investigation. Naomi, Germany denies having acted under pressure from the Israeli government, but it has not given any official reason for pulling the plug on the funding for these Palestinian NGOs. From your research, can you tell what the reason was for the defunding?
The process is incredibly opaque, and that's the main criticism that the German development organizations have, that they don't even know what they're defending themselves and their partners against. We had a lot of talks with people from various sectors. Sources were quite scared to go on the record, particularly the ones in the development sector, because they were scared of losing funds, of maybe even being labelled anti-Semitic. I mean, I think maybe the main point here is to re-emphasize, as we already did in the piece, that these two organizations, even though they are quite small, they are extremely critical of the current government. One of them is working with conscientious objectors, which is actually illegal. Like to refuse to go to the army is illegal in Israel, particularly at a time, of course, when Israel is waging a war in Gaza. And the other one campaigns for the return of Palestinian refugees and their descendants, which is also highly controversial in Israel. So these two organizations are not popular in Israel, and that may be also played into the decision here in Berlin.
So the German government is being tight-lipped about all of this. What about the Israeli government? Have they responded to your findings?
Not really. I mean, they didn't respond to any of our critical questions about the wider clampdown, about whether they had exerted any pressure on Germany. They completely ignored all of those questions. They only responded to specific questions we had about the Palestinian NGOs that were defunded. And there they did say that they had shared information with the German Foreign Office and also with the intelligence services here.
What do we know about those Palestinian NGOs that were defunded? I understand there were 6 of them. Tell us about them.
Right, so these Palestinian organizations were listed as terror organizations by the then Israeli government back in 2021. One of the most prominent organizations among them, Al-Haq, had provided testimony to the ICC. We don't know if that's why they made the terror list. A lot of organizations, also the European foreign offices at the time, said that they didn't think the evidence was particularly compelling. Germany joined an official statement by 9 EU foreign ministers saying that they didn't think it was sufficient and continued to fund the organizations. But then after October the 7th, they basically did a policy U-turn and quietly stopped funding them.
How unusual is all this, Naomi? Because the German government funds all sorts of groups and organizations and projects around the world. How unusual is it that they would withdraw funding for NGOs like this?
So, of course, we talked to a lot of sources within the development sector, and everyone agreed that this is very unusual outside of the Israeli-Palestinian context. We actually have heard of at least 11, maybe even 15 organizations in Israel and the Palestinian territories being defunded. We weren't able to corroborate it. That's why we could corroborate these 6 and the 2 Israeli ones, but it's likely that there are actually more of these organizations that have been defunded.
Naomi Conrad, our investigative reporter, thank you very much.